I initially set up this shot to look completely different from what I usually shoot, but it looks exactly the same. The only real difference in the look of the shot is that I am lit with natural lighting, and you can see my chair. Last night I was thinking quite a lot about November coming up and NaNoWriMo, and I've sort of shirked it a couple of years. I really wanted to do it, but I'm a slow writer, so 50,000 years? 50,000 years! 50,000 words in 1 month seems like an almost impossible task. So I've had this idea for a story last night, which I'd probably carry the idea and write about it if I remember it in November. It was about a character who's in his 20s, he lives with his mother, who's always working, you never see her, and his older sister, who's going to be like early 30s, late 20s, and his little brother, who is like 2 to 3, I think. I'm not quite sure. This is just an idea. But it's a character who's very devoid from reality. He sort of isn't focused very hard on anything that he does. He doesn't commit to anything that he does. He has a lot of half-finished projects laying around his room. So this is a person who's not very attached to reality. And he has this peculiar psychological disorder which isn't explained properly at first. And then it sort of fleshes it out as it goes, where he sort of just forgets things, but if he doesn't experience what he's forgotten. So he'll get up in the morning, be sitting about his house, and then suddenly he'll be walking in the middle of town for some reason. At some point during the book, he's going to notice a girl who's good looking, who's dressed all in white, and is on the edge of where he's able to talk to her. Say that he tries to communicate with her, he tries to talk to her, but she just doesn't avoid him as of such, just eludes him. And perhaps he would probably forget a lot of things while trying to find her, so there'll be lots of times where he's walking, trying to catch up with her at the park, and then he'll slip out of what he's thinking, and then he'll be in a car park at night time, and she's getting into a car and driving away, and you don't know where the hell he is, or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I'm looking over here a lot because I don't look at people while I'm thinking. I'm looking at you. It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, and it's going to be as if the girl in white, who she's always in white for some reason, she would be a symbol of, say, the future, how elusive, how uncertain, how fickle the future can be. Almost a bit. She'd also symbolise that the White Rabbit out of Alice in Wonderland. But that's probably the story that I'd like to write a book around. I don't know if I could do 50,000 words, but I'll give it a go. I have other ideas. In my past, I've attempted to write short stories. I think my oldest one was Z45. It was Z some number, and it was the name of a virus which, in the future, Tom and another really unimaginative name discover a secret laboratory in their hometown underneath an old cave, where there were physical viruses in test tubes, in the bio sci-fi genre, where you'd see animals float around in test tubes, but except it was viruses in their physical form, because in that future day and age they would be everything in the computer can be made physical, so and everyone can be made digital. Everything physical can be transferred into something digital, and vice versa. So they'd find all these, and then they'd accidentally release the virus back into the computer, and it would do something on the internet, and he like be deleting real people, and they'd have to find these two main characters would have to find a way of stopping this Z42 and getting it and stopping it. That was a short story which I began to write and then completely gave up. And I think I lost the file, or it was on an old laptop which just got so out of date it's no good anymore. That was probably one of my first short stories that I attempted to write, and then I've written a few, maybe a handful of short stories as a kid. The most recent one that I wrote was called Kidnapped, and it was about the experience of being kidnapped, and from the perspective of someone who was kidnapped. And it starts from waking up and he's inside a crate, and it was actually more interesting, the more difficult it was to write, because I had to write it from the perspective of being inside a wooden crate and everything you could feel. Because as soon as your sense of sight is taken away, you have to explain the sound, and it becomes a lot easier because you can describe all the small things, like the feeling of being moved about, or the feeling of wood, or so there's so many things. If you, for someone who's not a great writer. For someone who's not a great writer, taking away the sense of sight is actually makes it easier, because you have far less to explain, and it is a really interesting experiment to try and write something where you're not explaining things about the sight of them. But I really wanted to make it so that he escaped, and he was running away from this person. This person caught up with him, and then had no weapons. So they beat him down with their shoes. And I thought that was hilarious, but it was not the tone of the piece of writing at all. This particular kidnap thing that I wrote, I was doing during my GCSE retake. And my teacher was like, "Oh, it's really great. What's this about him being beat by shoes?" What? No, get rid of it. I was like, "Oh, okay. You are marking it, so I got no choice." But, you know, maybe one day my fantasy of a man running away from his captor being beaten by shoes, it'll be brought to fruition at some point. Oh, for the first few of these video blogs that I did, I wrote the script, I wrote an outline script, or some of them, like last week, I wrote a poem, just impromptu wrote a poem. But I feel really sort of wooden with a script. I feel really difficult and awkward with a script. Whereas this week I'm just doing this. I'm just sitting down and talking. But the problem with just sitting down and talking is that it doesn't connect. I have no direction. I can't make anything relevant to what I'm saying. It doesn't work very well. It's kind of difficult to make it sound like I'm competent in any way. Oh, you know, it just happens. I was meant to be sitting like this so that the light caught my face, but you know, I'm left-handed. So I've been like this with a massive shadow over this side of the face when I could have been like this. God damn. Writing isn't my strong point. It's not something I'm particularly good at. I'm better at watching or reading. I'm more of a viewer than a creator. As you can tell through my content, I'm definitely more of a viewer than a creator. Which is mainly why I'm doing this, actually. Because, you know, I'm not much of a runner, but if you get up and go and exercise, it's good for you. I'm not much of a creator, but if I start creating things, I get to practice creativity and I'll get better at it. That's the idea. That's the intention I'm going for here, really, to be honest. Be more creative. Right, I think that's enough for me. You've clearly heard enough of me talking about stuff. So, I guess I'll see you next week. Goodbye.